American Airlines Flight 191 tragedy. On the afternoon of May 25, 1979, a devastating accident occurred at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago, shaking the entire aviation industry. This was the crash of Flight 191, which became the deadliest aviation disaster in U.S. history. It was such a wonderful day, and early in the morning people were out with their families to visit different places. But little did they know that today an incident was going to happen around them which will forever be written in history. Flight 191 was a scheduled American Airlines flight, set to depart from Chicago for Los Angeles. The aircraft was a McDonnell Douglas DC-10 model, delivered to American Airlines on February 25, 1972. Over its 7 years in service, the plane had completed 20,000 flight hours. Crew and pilot experience. Captain Walter Lux, who was in command of the flight, was an exceptionally experienced pilot with over 22,000 flight hours, 3,000 of which were on the DC-10. Captain Lux was also qualified to fly 17 different types of aircraft. Although Captain Lux was scheduled to have the day off, he was called in to fly Flight 191 due to another pilot falling ill. First Officer James Dillard, aged 49, had 9,275 flight hours, while Flight Engineer Alfred Udovich, aged 56, was also part of the flight crew. Moments before the crash. Flight 191 was scheduled to take off from runway 32R at 2:56 p.m. All passengers and crew, totaling 258 passengers, were on board. At approximately 3 p.m., the flight completed its final preparations and received takeoff clearance from ATC, Air Traffic Control. During takeoff, First Officer Dillard was piloting the aircraft, while Captain Lux was monitoring the instruments. The pilots gave the final takeoff briefing, deciding that if a problem occurred before reaching 80 knots, the takeoff would be aborted, but after reaching 120 knots, it would be impossible to cancel the takeoff. The engine detachment. At 3:03 p.m., Flight 191 began its takeoff roll. As the aircraft reached 140 knots, Captain Lux instructed First Officer Dillard to rotate, meaning to lift the plane off the ground. However, just as this maneuver was being executed, a loud noise came from the left engine, which detached violently from the aircraft. This was an extremely unexpected and critical situation. The pilots were unaware that the engine had completely separated from the plane. By this point, the aircraft had reached 150 knots, making it impossible to abort the takeoff. Loss of control and the crash. The plane continued with the takeoff and reached approximately 300 feet in altitude, but the loss of the left engine caused significant failures in the plane's hydraulic and electrical systems. The ATC controller visually observed the engine separate from the aircraft and immediately notified emergency services. With hydraulic system failure, the leading edge slats on the left wing retracted, causing the plane to roll to the right. Just 50 seconds later, the plane crashed into a nearby parking lot. All 271 passengers and crew perished in the crash. Why did the crash happen? The primary cause of the crash was the left engine's detachment during takeoff. The engine separation damaged several critical systems, including the hydraulic and electrical systems. These system failures caused the left wing to stall, and the aircraft became uncontrollable. The pilots were unable to comprehend the severity of the situation in time, and the lack of time left them with no effective options. Impact of the crash. The crash of American Airlines Flight 191 remains the deadliest aviation disaster in U.S. history, shaking the entire aviation industry to its core.